Imagine, instead of just one story, a whole continent shaking off colonialism. But through, well, four incredibly distinct, powerful visions.
Yeah, not just one voice, but like a symphony, really.
Exactly. Today, we're diving deep into the minds and the legacies of four absolute giants. Jomo Kenyatta of Kenya, Patrice Lumumba of Congo, Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana, and Julius Nyerere of Tanzania. We're exploring not just what they did, but how their profoundly different approaches shaped modern Africa and, why their struggles, their ideas, they remain so incredibly relevant today.
Indeed. And our mission, I think, with this deep dive is really to unpack the distinct paths these giants took to independence. They're often contrasting visions for unity, for governance.
Yeah, very different.
Their defining characteristics, their core ideologies, and the profound, sometimes quite complex legacies they left behind. We'll be drawing from, well, a pretty rich stack of sources.
Good stuff.
Academic analyses of their leadership, detailed accounts of their journeys, and even direct transcripts of their most powerful, foundational speeches, trying to bring their voices to life a bit.
That's fantastic. So get ready for some surprising facts, I think, thought-provoking comparisons, and hopefully some really deep insights into the challenges, but also the triumphs of a continent forging its own destiny.
Yeah, we're aiming to distill the essence of their leadership, trying to offer you a shortcut maybe to understanding that really complex tapestry of post-colonial Africa.
Okay, let's kick things off then. Let's unpack this with the very spark of independence, because while the universal goal across Africa was clearly, self-determination, it's truly fascinating to observe the sheer diversity in how these leaders ignited and led their nations to freedom. Their foundational experiences or intellectual journeys, they really set them apart, didn't they?
Completely. They laid the groundwork for the paths they'd eventually chart.
Let's start with Jomo Kenyatta of Kenya, a figure whose early activism and, well, eventual symbolic martyrdom carved a unique, and I think it's fair to say, a rather complex path to liberation.
Yeah, Kenyatta, born Kamau, he got into the political arena pretty early on. He became active in the Kikuyu Central Association, the KCA, back in the 1920s.
Right.
But it was his nearly 17 transformative years spent in Europe, mainly in London, that really shaped his approach.
17 years, that's a long time.
It is. And he wasn't just, lobbying the British Colonial Office for Kikuyu land rights, which he was doing. He was transforming himself. This period was crucial because he emerged as a masterful propagandist.
How so?
Well, he was relentlessly writing articles, giving speeches all across Europe, petitioning the British Parliament.
Yeah.
Really exposing the brutal realities of colonial land alienation and the systematic exploitation of African peoples. He was, in essence, putting British imperialism on trial right there in its own backyard.
And it wasn't just raw activism or direct lobbying, was it? I mean, his scholarly work, Facing Mount Kenya, published in 1938, that was much more than just an academic text.
Oh, absolutely. Written under the guidance of the renowned anthropologist Bronislaw Malinowski, it became a highly symbolic political statement.
A statement of what, exactly?
It was a powerful defense of Kikuyu culture, of customary law. It systematically demolished those pervasive colonial myths about African societies being primitive or uncivilized. It was asserting an intellectual claim to dignity, to self-governance.
And how did his engagement with the international Black diaspora, and particularly that pivotal 1945 Fifth Pan-African Congress in Manchester, how did that further crystallize his mission?
Manchester. That Congress was pivotal. Kenyatta engaged deeply with leading figures of the international Black diaspora, people like Dubois, Padmore. He absorbed this really militant atmosphere that was demanding immediate independence for African nations, not just gradual reforms.
So a shift in thinking.
A solidification, definitely. It solidified his understanding that Kenya's struggle wasn't isolated. It was part of a larger global fight against racial oppression and colonial subjugation. So his return to Kenya in 1946 was met with immense anticipation.
Right.
And he quickly took leadership of the Kenya African Union, the KAU, and he transformed it. He took it from being a sort of elite intellectual body into a truly mass nationalist movement, reaching out far beyond just the Kikuyu.
And he electrified crowds, didn't he? With that message, Uhuru Nkazi, freedom and work, linking political liberation directly to economic justice, to getting the land back.
Exactly. And the sources show he consciously reached out to other communities, trying to forge a united Kenyan identity against the colonial oppressor.
Yeah.
Which, as you know, is vital in a nation with such diverse ethnic groups.
Now, here's where his story gets incredibly complex, and where we really see the heavy hand of the colonial authorities. the Mau uprising. Kenyatta publicly disassociated himself from it, denied leading it. But how did his eventual arrest and that subsequent Kapenguria trial in 1952, paradoxically, end up cementing his status as the revered Mzee, the undisputed symbol of Kenyan resistance?
It's a remarkable paradox, isn't it? The colonial authorities, they just perceived him as an undeniable threat, his articulate, charismatic presence. It didn't really matter if he was directly involved with Mau Mau or not.
They just saw him as the figurehead.
Precisely. So his arrest and subsequent imprisonment from 1953 to 1961 were intended to break the nationalist movement. But they have the exact opposite effect.
How so?
His trial was widely seen, not just in Kenya, but around the world, as a sham. It transformed him into a martyr. His time in prison, while physically confining, paradoxically just amplified his political stature. He became the Mzee, the respected elder. His very absence became a symbol of colonial injustice.
Making his release and independence feel inevitable.
Virtually inevitable in the eyes of the people, yes.
And then upon his release, Kenyatta displayed this incredible pragmatism. He skillfully navigated the independence negotiations, managing to reconcile these disparate nationalist factions and, maybe surprisingly, reassuring the white settler farmers.
Yeah, that forgive and forget the past mantra.
Exactly. Aimed at preventing mass land confiscation, right? By securing British funds for a land transfer scheme rather than immediate, sweeping redistribution.
Yeah, it was pragmatic. Some might even say cautious. But it led to Kenya's independence on December 12, 1963. A really complex journey for Kenyatta, but ultimately pragmatically successful in achieving that first goal, independence.
Okay, let's pivot now. From Kenyatta's calculated pragmatism to Patrice Lumumba of Congo, his path was, well, utterly different, marked by an intellectual fire and a defiant ascent that captivated, then tragically shocked, the world.
A very different story.
What were the formative experiences that forged Lumumba's passionate, uncompromising stance against colonialism? Because the Belgian Congo was notorious, wasn't it?
Oh, notoriously brutal. Lumumba's early life was just steeped in that suffocating reality. Unlike the British, who often used indirect rule, the Belgians were known for this particularly extractive, dehumanizing approach, turning the Congo into King Leopold II's personal fiefdom before it even became a formal Belgian colony.
Unbelievable cruelty.
Horrific. Lumumba witnessed firsthand the theft of immense mineral resources, copper, diamonds, cobalt, uranium, and the sheer human cost. Forced labor, the mutilation of Congolese bodies, the complete denial of dignity. This visceral experience forged his intellectual growth.
How did he channel that?
He was a voracious reader, a self-taught intellectual. He honed this sharp pen against colonial hypocrisy, writing articles, essays, subtly at first, then much more overtly challenging the system. And apparently a visit to Belgium was a key moment.
Really?
He saw the wealth extracted from his land just openly displayed in Brussels shop windows. Imagine that. A stark, visceral lesson in colonial plunder and exploitation.
That must have been incredibly powerful. Infuriating. So in 1958, he co-founded Mouvement National Congolais, the MNC. How did this party stand out in the fractured Congolese political landscape?
The MNC was pretty unique because it rejected the ethnic and regional divisions that the Belgians, quite strategically, had fostered among the Congolese. Lumumba advocated instead for a truly radical demand: immediate, unconditional independence.
No compromises.
None. And coupled with that was a clear vision of a unified, centralized Congo. He argued very forcefully that only a strong, unified state could reclaim its sovereignty and its wealth from foreign interests. A stark contrast to the many ethnic-based parties the Belgians preferred to cultivate and, frankly, play against each other.
What's fascinating here is the impact of meeting Kwame Nkrumah. That All-African People's Conference in Accra in '58, it apparently just electrified Lumumba with Nkrumah's grand Pan-African vision.
Absolutely transformative. It wasn't just a professional meeting. It was a deep ideological alignment. Nkrumah became a real mentor figure.
And Lumumba's resolve hardened further after his arrest, right? Following a banned MNC rally in 1959. That turned him into a national martyr.
It did. That surge in popular support led directly to the MNC winning a plurality in the 1960 elections, setting the stage for, well, the defining moment.
June 30, 1960, Independence Day. King Baudouin of Belgium gives this paternalistic speech, basically painting Belgian rule as a benevolent gift. Condescending, really.
And Lumumba, he wasn't having it.
Not at all. In an incredibly powerful, totally unscripted response, he just rose to the microphone. He directly challenged Baudouin's narrative. declared the end of humiliating slavery, proclaimed Congo's independence not just for Congo, but as a decisive step on the path leading to the complete liberation of the entire African continent.
Wow. Linking Congo's freedom to Africa's freedom right there.
Instantly. This act of speaking unvarnished truth to power, of reclaiming dignity on the very day of independence. It truly shook the world. It was this defiant rejection of false gratitude. And tragically, it sealed Lumumba's fate in the eyes of powerful external forces. A fire that burned incredibly brightly, but far too briefly. Okay, from Lumumba's fiery truth, let's turn to Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana. His journey was driven by a meticulously developed ideological blueprint and a masterful command of mass action. His path to revolution was arguably the most deliberately conceptualized.
Yeah, Nkrumah's journey really began not just with practical activism, but with extensive academic and ideological development. In America, then London, from 1935 to 1947.
A long period of study.
A very long period.
Yeah.
He devoured philosophy, theology, economics. But crucially, he synthesized these with political thought. Marxism, Pan-Africanism, drawing heavily from figures like Marcus Garvey, W.E.B. Du Bois, and his key intellectual mentor, George Padmore. And critically, he studied Gandhi's tactics of nonviolent resistance.
So he wasn't just absorbing ideas, he was actively crafting an actionable ideology.
Exactly. His role in organizing the West African Students' Union, WASU, and that pivotal 1945 Fifth Pan-African Congress, alongside Kenyatta and others, it solidified his mission. Not just to liberate Ghana, the Gold Coast then, but to unite all of Africa. That was always the bigger picture for him.
And upon his return to the Gold Coast in 47, he just immediately ignited the political landscape. He really distinguished himself by mobilizing the masses, didn't he? Not just the educated elite, but workers, farmers, market women, even war veterans.
Yeah, with that simple, potent message, independence now. In 1949, he founded the Convention People's Party, the CPP, with the rallying cry, self-government now.
What made his approach to mass mobilization so effective, do you think?
Well, it was both charismatic and meticulously organized. He genuinely understood the power of the ordinary person, and he knew how to connect. Then he launched Positive Action in January 1950.
Explain Positive Action again.
It was a coordinated campaign. Nationwide strikes, boycotts, nonviolent civil disobedience. It effectively paralyzed the colonial administration. It wasn't just protest, it was strategic disruption on a massive scale.
And he was arrested for it.
He was imprisoned for these actions. But even from his cell, he directed the CPP, leading them to sweep the 1951 elections. This huge popular mandate forced the British to release him and allow him to form a government. It transformed that impossible dream of immediate self-rule into a political reality.
And his famous words upon release,
"Seek ye first the political kingdom, and all else shall be added unto you," became a rallying cry for liberation movements right across the continent.
So as leader of government business and later prime minister, Nkrumah just meticulously dismantled colonial structures, expanded education, built schools, universities.
Invested heavily in infrastructure, things like roads, the massive Akosombo Dam project, and systematically Africanized the civil service, replacing colonial administrators with Ghanaians.
Through shrewd negotiations and that sustained mass pressure, he forced Britain's hand, leading to Ghana's independence on March 6, 1957.
The first sub-Saharan colony to achieve freedom. It became this vibrant beacon of hope, truly inspired liberation movements across the entire continent.
A true architect of independence and a living example for so many others. Okay, our final leader in this first segment is Julius Nyerere of Tanzania, often known as the Mwalimu, the teacher president. His path was one of academic conscience, moral authority, and remarkably peaceful mass mobilization.
Nyerere's brilliance really shone early. He excelled right from his schooling through Maker University in Uganda, eventually earning a scholarship to the University of Edinburgh from 1949 to 1952.
Edinburgh, what did he study there?
Economics and history, and crucially, he encountered Fabian socialism there. This period was critical because it didn't just expose him to new economic theories, it crystallized his core belief.
Which is?
That true independence wasn't just about political flags. It was also about economic self-reliance, cultural authenticity, and a social system profoundly rooted in African communal values. Fabian socialism, with its emphasis on gradual democratic social reform through parliamentary means, deeply influenced his vision of equitable development and social justice.
So in 1954, upon his return, he co-founded the Tanganyika African National Union, TANU. With that clear, pragmatic, and unifying vision, Uhuru na Umoja, freedom and unity.
Yeah, that slogan was both a strategy and a deeply held belief for him. He He deliberately built Tanzania as a super-tribal movement, meaning it actively preached national identity over ethnic division.
Can you elaborate on the significance of his strategic use of Swahili as the national language in fostering this unity? Because Tanganyika was incredibly diverse ethnically.
Absolutely. Over 120 distinct ethnic groups, each with its own language or dialect. Trying to build unity on, say, a single tribal language would have been incredibly divisive. Nyere's strategic choice to promote Swahili, which was already an indigenous lingua franca, widely spoken across East Africa as the national language, was, frankly, brilliant.
How so?
It serves as a powerful symbol of unity, but also a practical tool for communication. It effectively bridged ethnic divides, fostering a shared national identity, creating a common bond among communities that might otherwise have struggled to understand each other. It was fundamental.
What's really remarkable, especially when you compare him to other leaders facing similar colonial structures, is his consistent rejection of armed struggle, a path many others felt was necessary. Instead, Nyere employed peaceful persuasion, tireless travel, reaching even the most remote villages to explain colonialism's injustice in simple, powerful terms. How else did he leverage this unique approach?
Well, he wielded moral force and international diplomacy with incredible skill. Nyere took Tanganyika's case directly to the United Nations Trusteeship Council, calmly, eloquently arguing against continued colonial rule.
So using the international stage.
Exactly. Presenting the injustices not just as a political grievance, but as a moral imperative. He won international sympathy that effectively isolated Britain and pressured them towards decolonization. He accepted a gradual transition, but his demand for Uhuru Sasa, freedom now, was unwavering.
And this measured yet firm approach worked.
It did. It led to Tanganyika achieving independence peacefully and unitedly on December 9, 1961. A truly singular testament to his unique leadership style and a powerful model for nonviolent liberation.
Okay, so once the flags were raised, the anthems played, the greater, maybe more complex challenge of uniting diverse peoples within these new nations really emerged.
The real work begins.
Exactly. How did these leaders conceptualize unity? Was it primarily, within their national borders, or did they extend their vision to embrace the entire continent? This is where that Pan-African spirit really comes into focus, and where we see some profound divergences in their nation-building approaches.
Yeah, big differences here.
Let's start by looking at Kenyatta's approach. It focused strongly on national cohesion, umoja, though, as we'll see, not without significant complications down the line.
Kenyatta's emphasis was unequivocally on national unity within Kenya. He famously declared, "We do not want the Kikuyu, the Luo, the Luya, or the Kamba to rule Kenya. We want the people of Kenya to rule Kenya." That was his guiding principle, promoting a united Kenyan identity against the backdrop of colonialism.
And he used Harambee, right, pulled together.
He did. He skillfully utilized Harambee as this powerful philosophy to foster collective effort within Kenya. It became a real grassroots movement for self-help projects, building schools, clinics, roads, galvanizing communities for local development, and, in theory, national cohesion.
In theory. But despite that powerful rhetoric of umoja and Harambee, his rule later became associated with, Kikuyu dominance in critical areas like land allocation, business, government.
Yeah, that bred significant resentment among other communities, didn't it? Creating a really complex legacy that definitely complicated his initial vision of national unity.
It's a stark reminder, isn't it, that even the loftiest ideals can clash with difficult political realities, the temptation of ethnic favoritism, inadvertently laying the groundwork for future social tensions and ethnic imbalances.
It certainly did. Now, for Patrice Lumumba, his commitment to a unified Congo was fierce, and it was deeply intertwined with his Pan-African aspirations.
How so?
Well, he distinguished his MNC party from ethnic-based parties precisely by its unwavering vision of a unified, centralized Congo. He saw ethnic divisions, those regional secessionist movements like in Katanga and South Kasai. He didn't see them as legitimate expressions of diversity.
He saw them
as treason, often orchestrated, he believed, by neocolonialists Belgium, its Western allies who sought to weaken the nation and maintain control over its vast mineral wealth.
And his Pan-Africanism was foundational, wasn't it? We touched on Nkrumah's influence.
Absolutely. He harbored this deep, almost spiritual belief in Pan-African solidarity. Viewing Congo's liberation as intrinsically linked to the complete freedom of the entire African continent, he saw Nkrumah not just as a colleague, but truly as a brother and mentor. embodying the continental liberation he envisioned for Congo.
So a Pan-Africanist in action even in his brief time.
Very much so.
Yeah.
Their shared vision of a liberated, unified Africa was a powerful bond.
Okay, moving to Kwame Nkrumah. He was, without a doubt, the continent's most fervent advocate for a United States of Africa.
Oh, absolutely the most fervent. His belief was that individual national independence was utterly meaningless without continental unity. Why? To effectively resist the insidious grip of neocolonialism and to fully harness Africa's immense collective potential for development.
He saw fragmentation as weakness.
Completely. He tirelessly lobbied for a strong continental government. Single foreign policy, unified military command, common currency. His famous declaration, "Africa must unite," wasn't just a slogan. For him, it was a strategic imperative for survival and prosperity in a world dominated by powerful blocs.
And Nkrumah didn't just talk the talk either, did he? He actively supported liberation movements across Africa, turned Ghana into a veritable mecca of African freedom fighters.
Yep, he really did. Ghana provided crucial training, funds, diplomatic cover for groups like the ANC from South Africa, Frelimo from Mozambique, and many others. His vision truly transcended national borders. He saw Ghana's independence as merely the first step toward that larger, unified African destiny.
A truly continental vision. And then we have Julius Nyerere. His guiding slogan, Huruna Umoja, freedom and unity, was both a strategy and a profound vision for Tanzania.
Yes, and he deliberately built TANU, as we said, as a super-tribal movement, intentionally transcending ethnic loyalties. He tirelessly preached national identity over ethnic division, which is a particularly challenging task in a country with Tanzania's diversity.
And his strategic use of Swahili again, that was key to bridging those divides.
Absolutely fundamental. Creating a shared identity, a common bond, a lingua franca that could unite people from different backgrounds who otherwise might not have understood each other. It was central to his nation-building project, and a really stark contrast to leaders who might have, perhaps unwittingly, fostered divisions.
So it's clear the concept of unity, whether national or continental, was paramount for all these leaders. But their methods, the scope of their aspirations, they varied dramatically, didn't they? Setting the stage for the different national fabrics they would eventually weave.
Very different paths to unity.
Okay, so unity wasn't just an ideal. It had to be implemented through actual governance structures, through economic systems. And here, we see profound divergences that shaped the very fabric of their new nations, leading to vastly different outcomes and often some unforeseen consequences.
Yeah, the practicalities of nation building are always messy.
Let's delve into how Jomo Kenyatta crafted his nation, a pragmatic capitalist approach, which, unfortunately, over time, drifted towards autocratic tendencies.
Well, initially, Kenyatta's rule in Kenya fostered what you could describe as a relatively pluralist political environment, at least on the surface. He was quite adept at manipulating various patronage factions, using state resources and appointments to maintain loyalty among different groups.
So managing the system.
Managing the system. While there was a semi-competitive electoral system, it was often managed pretty carefully to ensure Kanonyu's dominance. However, from the mid-1970s, as he faced rising criticisms, challenges to his authority, he consciously shifted towards more autocratic personal rule.
A deliberate shift.
It seems so. A deliberate move to suppress critics, consolidate his power. And unfortunately, that led to a significant curtailment of civic liberties, press freedom. The political space narrowed.
And this transition wasn't subtle, was it? It was a systematic consolidation of power. His government quickly became highly intolerant of dissent, leading to a de facto and later de jure one-party state after KANU merged with the opposition KADU in '64.
Right, and we saw the consequences, the sidelining, detention, or even mysterious deaths of political rivals. People like the prominent opposition figure Ojinga Odinga, who was detained repeatedly, and the deeply tragic assassination of Tom Mboya in 1969.
A huge shock.
Huge. It sparked widespread outrage and further cemented that perception of a narrowing, dangerous political space.
And economically, Kenya under Kenyatta took an unbridled capitalistic tack, as one source put it.
Yeah, he actively encouraged foreign investment, particularly from Western nations, fostered a very pro-business environment. And this policy, it did lead to a significant doubling of national income during his tenure, which is impressive on paper. But this growth largely benefited a wealthy African elite, often people closely associated with the ruling party, with Kenyatta's inner circle. This gave rise to that term, Wabenzi.
Ah, yes, the people of the Mercedes-Benz.
Exactly. Symbolizing the ostentatious wealth of a small, privileged class. And this, of course, significantly grew the wealth disparities between the rich and the poor, really undermining that initial promise of economic justice that had fueled the independence movement.
His priorities seemed to be stability and reconciliation over radical land reform, that forgive and forget the past mantra again.
Mm-hmm. While that pragmatic stance aimed to prevent mass confiscation of land from white settlers, and it did maintain a degree of agricultural stability, it also entrenched those deeply ingrained inequalities inherited from the colonial era. It largely created a wealthy African landowning class, often, to the chagrin of the very freedom fighters and landless peasants who believe independence meant sweeping radical change.
So the legacy Kenyatta left behind for Kenya.
All right. Very complex. Independent and stable, yes. It provided a period of continuity and growth, but also economically unequal and politically constricted. It saw authoritarian tendencies and ethnic imbalances become institutionalized, challenges that, frankly, continue to echo in Kenyan politics even today.
A tough, contradictory legacy indeed. Now, let's turn back to Patrice Lumumba. His vision for a centralized state, for economic sovereignty. A vision tragically cut short, but one that remains such a powerful symbol.
Even though his time as prime minister was incredibly brief, barely 6 months, and just marked by immense internal and external interference, Lumumba envisioned a strong, centralized, unified Congolese state.
Economically.
He passionately asserted that Congo's vast mineral resources, that copper, cobalt, diamonds, uranium, belong solely to its people. He emphasized economic sovereignty, demanded the urgent need to reclaim economic control for those foreign corporations, predominantly Belgian and American, that had long plundered the nation's wealth for their own benefit, leaving precious little for the Congolese people.
His defiance in that Independence Day speech, it wasn't just political oratory, was it? It was an act of speaking unvarnished truth to power, shattering that colonial narrative of a benevolent handover, refusing false gratitude.
Yeah, absolutely. He famously countered King Baudouin's paternalistic remarks, reminding the world that Congolese independence was won through struggle and tears, through suffering and blood. It sent this clear, uncompromising message. Congo would control its own destiny, its own wealth, something foreign powers were clearly not prepared to allow.
And that defiant stance, that unwavering commitment to true economic sovereignty and a unified Congo, it ultimately sealed his fate.
Tragically, yes. It directly led to his ouster, the unraveling of the fledgling government, and devastatingly his brutal assassination in January 1961.
And we now know.
We now know from declassified documents this was carried out with the assistance of the United States Central Intelligence Agency, the CIA, and Belgian intelligence. It was a murder orchestrated to maintain economic control over Congo's minerals and, frankly, to extinguish the flame of authentic African liberation that Lumumba represented.
His last letter to his wife. It's heartbreaking, but so powerful.
Dead or alive, it is not I who counts. It is the Congo. It is our poor people. History will one day have its say. It reveals the profound depth of his conviction, his prophetic understanding of the forces arrayed against him, a truly haunting legacy.
Heartbreaking. Okay, shifting gears again to Kwame Nkrumah in Ghana. Pursuing ambitious modernization rooted in African socialism, but also facing challenges with growing authoritarianism as he tried to implement his grand vision.
Yeah, domestically, Nkrumah pursued ambitious modernization, championing what he termed African socialism. Now, this wasn't simply a copy of Soviet or Western models. It emphasized state control of key industries: cocoa, mining, manufacturing, and central planning for rapid industrialization, and collective welfare for the populace.
And his goal was distinctly African.
Yes, for Africa to pursue its own path, free from Cold War alignments. He famously asserted, "We face neither east nor west, we face forward," advocating for a third way that prioritized African self-determination and economic independence.
And his philosophical framework, consciencism, was an attempt to provide the intellectual underpinning for this.
Exactly. It sought to synthesize traditional African communal values with other influences, Islamic, Euro-Christian traditions, to create a uniquely African ideology for development and nation building, really trying to build a system indigenous to the continent rather than just importing foreign models.
But to maintain control and push this ambitious, often costly vision, his government grew increasingly authoritarian.
It did. He implemented measures like the Preventive Detention Act, which allowed for the imprisonment of political opponents without trial, effectively silencing dissent. This concentration of power, coupled with growing economic difficulties and, let's be clear, external destabilization efforts, it ultimately played a role in his downfall.
The military coup in 1966.
Yes, which Nkrumah himself analyzed, perhaps quite accurately, as a neocolonial counter-revolution, highlighting the perils of unchecked power, yes, but also the pervasive influence of external sabotage on these newly independent African states.
A cautionary tale on multiple levels. Finally, let's explore Julius Nyerere's Ujamaa, or familyhood, philosophy in Tanzania, centered on self-reliance, which, while principled, had its own significant controversies, particularly in its implementation.
Nyerere crafted Ujamaa as this uniquely African socialism, rooted deeply in pre-colonial communal values. It consciously rejected both Western capitalism, with its focus on individual accumulation, and Soviet-style communism, with its atheistic and state-collectivist tendencies.
What were its key principles?
Self-reliance, aiming to reduce dependence on foreign aid, on external economic forces, and economic democracy through the nationalization of major industries, banks, plantations. His goal was to build a society where resources were shared for the common good, reminiscent, he argued, of traditional African family structures.
Now, Ujamaa also involved that very controversial villagization policy, Ujamaa Vijijini.
Yes. This encouraged, and later, quite forcefully, compelled peasants to move into planned villages. The noble goals were clear: provide access to services like schools, clinics, clean water, foster communal spirit, and cooperative farming.
But in practice, how was it received, and what were the unintended consequences?
In practice, villagization proved deeply unpopular, and in many cases brutal. Forced resettlement disrupted traditional farming practices, destroyed existing community structures, and was often implemented with coercion, even violence, by local officials.
So despite the noble intentions
of providing social services, the policy led to significant economic stagnation. Agricultural productivity declined. It eroded individual initiative. It was a really stark example of how a well-intentioned, human-centered ideal could falter dramatically in its forced implementation.
And to implement Ujamaa and maintain national unity, TANU, and later its successor, CCM, became the sole legal party.
That's right, a one-party state.
But what truly sets Nyerere apart from many other leaders of his era is his rejection of personality cults and that almost unheard-of decision to voluntarily step down from power in 1985. A truly rare act.
Extremely rare. He famously stated, "Leaders must know when to leave."
What did that say about him?
It spoke volumes about his character, his principles. His championing of human-centered development, Utu, derived from the Swahili word for humanity. It prioritized well-being, dignity, equality over mere GDP growth or industrial output. He believed development should serve people, not the other way around.
So even with Ujamaa's economic failures,
Despite Ujamaa's economic failures and the hardships of villagization, its core values, human dignity, equality, self-reliance, unity, they remain beacons, subjects of profound discussion in development circles, marking him as a leader who consistently put people, perhaps even at the cost of rapid economic growth, at the center of his vision. These leaders clearly had vastly different blueprints for building their nations, reflecting the incredibly complex choices faced by independent African states.
absolutely. Okay, beyond the policies, the grand strategies, these leaders were also defined by their individual character, weren't they? And the powerful messages they articulated to their people and the world, their personal traits, their iconic statements. They truly captured their unyielding spirit and left an indelible mark.
Personalities mattered hugely.
Let's revisit Jomo Kenyatta, often seen as the pragmatic Z, the respected elder.
Kenyatta was frequently described as a masterful manipulator. Not necessarily in a purely negative sense, but in his ability to skillfully move with and even engineer consensus among disparate groups. He was adept at political maneuvering, using patronage, persuasion to unite factions.
And despite his complex, often distanced relationship with the Mao uprising.
His imprisonment by the British, as we said, solidified his status as the undisputed symbol of Kenyan resistance, the revered Mzee. This reverence gave him unparalleled authority upon release. His pragmatism shone through when he crucially reassured white settlers they had a place in independent Kenya. And that famous mantra, "forgive and forget the past," it perfectly encapsulates his post-independence approach to national healing. Or, as some critics would argue, a selective amnesia that allowed inequalities to persist.
A complex figure. From the calculated pragmatism of the Mzee, we turn back to Patrice Lumumba, the uncompromising firebrand.
He just burned with this incandescent fury against injustice, didn't he? Particularly the deep-seated brutality of Belgian colonialism. He was exceptionally bright, articulate, constantly honing his writing as a weapon against colonial hypocrisy. His charisma, his intellect were undeniable, coupled with that fierce, almost absolute commitment to national unity, refusing any compromise with secessionist forces.
What defines Lumumba most, perhaps, is that uncompromising and defiant nature, especially in that unscripted Independence Day speech.
Oh, definitely. It was a deliberate, courageous act of speaking unvarnished truth to power, just shattering the paternalistic colonial narrative. He famously responded to King Baudouin's patronizing remarks, not with gratitude, but with that stark reminder of colonial suffering.
And his famous defiant declaration.
Nous ne sommes pas vos singes. We are not your monkeys.
Ah.
It remains this electrifying symbol of African dignity, of self-determination, a total rejection of any subservient role in the world, a profound statement of radical equality.
That line alone, it captures so much fire and conviction. Now, let's look at Kwame Nkrumah again, the visionary, the relentless mobilizer.
Known as bright and restless in his youth, constantly seeking knowledge, purpose, he emerged from his extensive studies in London not just as an intellectual, but as one possessed by a singular mission: the complete liberation and unification of Africa.
And he displayed unparalleled charisma.
Absolutely. Electrifying crowds with his rallying cry of "Independence now." He was truly relentless in systematically dismantling colonial structures, replacing them with institutions of self-governance, constantly pushing for full, immediate independence. His powerful words upon release from prison in '51, "Seek ye first the political kingdom, and all else shall be added unto you," became a guiding principle for so many African liberation movements across the continent, capturing that belief that political freedom was the essential prerequisite for everything else.
The foundation for everything. Finally, we have Julius Nyerere again, the Walamu, the teacher president, indeed often seen as the moral conscience of Africa.
Yeah, known as the teacher president, famously ruling from a simple house, not some grand palace, demanding to be called teacher rather than any more grandiose titles. It really reflected his humble, didactic approach to leadership.
Exceptionally brilliant, wasn't he? A nationalist with a deep socialist conscience. Genuinely believed in the inherent goodness, the communal spirit of African societies.
And a pragmatic, clear, unifying leader, tirelessly building TANU as that super-tribal movement through peaceful persuasion, dialogue, eschewing violence even when others embraced it. He became the unchallenged moral and logistical hub of Africa's liberation struggles. That alone is a towering achievement of international solidarity.
And uniquely, in a continent where leaders often clung to power, he voluntarily stepped down as president in '85, believing leaders must know when to leave.
That act spoke volumes about his character, his principles, his profound respect for democratic transitions, setting a rare, powerful example for post-colonial leadership.
It's clear their individual personalities, their iconic pronouncements, were just as influential as their policies, weren't they? Leaving an indelible mark on the nations they forged, and for some, the broader unified continent they envisioned.
Definitely shaped their legacies.
Okay, let's talk more about that Pan-African ideal, because it wasn't just a dream for many of these leaders, it was a guiding principle. It dictated their foreign policy, profoundly shaped the destiny of the entire continent. It's an essential thread running through their legacies, and maybe where we see the clearest vision for Africa's future, at least aspirationally.
The continental dimension is crucial.
Let's delve into Kwame Nkrumah again, who really stands out as the primary architect of continental unity.
Nkrumah's role as the continent's most fervent apostle for a United States of Africa is truly unparalleled. His vision wasn't just for Ghana's freedom, it was for a unified African continent. Believing, as we said, that true independence was meaningless without that continental unity to resist neocolonialism effectively and harness Africa's vast collective potential for development, for global influence. He saw that individual fragmented states would remain vulnerable.
And he didn't just advocate, he put his ideas into print, sparking huge controversy. That seminal work, Neocolonialism, The Last Stage of Imperialism, published in 1965, a fiery exposé.
It really was. In it, he meticulously argued that political independence was a mere facade if economic control through multinational corporations, foreign aid, global financial institutions remained with former colonizers and their allies.
And that stance, it enraged Western powers.
Oh, completely.
Right.
Particularly the United States, who immediately cut aid to Ghana. They viewed Nkrumah as dangerously anti-Western, too close to the Soviet bloc. It was a stark warning he delivered, with what turned out to be chilling prescience.
Absolutely. And under his leadership, Ghana became the headquarters and financier of liberation movements across Africa, providing training camps, funds, diplomatic cover, safe havens.
Earning Accra that well-deserved title, Mecca of African freedom fighters.
Yeah.
Groups like the ANC from apartheid South Africa, liberation movements from Rhodesia, now Zimbabwe, Mozambique, they were all active there. He saw Ghana's liberation is incomplete until all of Africa was free. Pan-Africanism was truly a cornerstone of his foreign policy.
From Ghana, let's shift to Tanzania under Julius Nyerere, which transformed into a true liberation sanctuary for the continent, albeit with a different, perhaps more pragmatic approach to Pan-Africanism.
Tanzania, under Nyerere, yes, it became the unchallenged moral and logistical hub of Africa's liberation struggles. Dar es Salaam, its capital, was famously known as the capital of the revolution.
And Nyerere framed this support not as interference, but as
a moral duty. A duty to his African brothers and sisters still under colonial rule or apartheid. He steadfastly maintained an active non-alignment in global affairs during the Cold War, refusing to side with either the American or Soviet blocs. And this stance, it earned Tanzania immense international respect, diplomatic leverage, despite making it a target for destabilization efforts from regimes like apartheid South Africa or colonial Portugal that were threatened by the liberation movements it hosted.
And the practical support Tanzania provided was immense, wasn't it?
Oh, huge. Hosting headquarters, providing vital training camps, arms, funding, safe passage for pivotal movements across southern Africa. We're talking about Frelimo from Mozambique, the ANC and PAX from South Africa, SWAPO from Namibia, Zinu-Zapu from Rhodesia, among others. His unwavering support for liberation movements was truly his towering success, directly helping to dismantle apartheid and colonialism across southern Africa, an undeniable legacy of continental solidarity. Now let's return briefly to Patrice Lumumba, whose fierce fight for economic sovereignty and dignity made him, in many ways, the quintessential Pan-African martyr.
Right. His deep connection to Kwame Nkrumah, which we discussed, it underscores his profound belief that Congo's liberation was intrinsically linked to Africa's complete freedom. He embodied that spirit of continental solidarity, seeing Congo's resources as belonging to all of Africa, not just foreign exploiters.
And his brutal assassination in January '61, with that proven assistance from the CIA and Belgian intelligence, it revealed the chilling lengths imperial powers would go to crush authentic African liberation and maintain economic control. It was a stark, tragic warning to any African leader who dared to challenge the established global order and assert true sovereignty over their nation's resources.
His legacy endures
as the indomitable spirit of Congo, the ghost that haunts the corridors of imperial power, and the eternal cry, "This is our land, our wealth, our future. We are not your monkeys." His death cemented his status as a symbol of resistance against neocolonialism, a powerful reminder of the ongoing struggle for true economic self-determination on the continent.
Finally, we look again at Jomo Kenyatta. While not as fervent a continental unifier as Nkrumah or as active a sanctuary as Nyerere, he was certainly a pragmatic Pan-African participant.
Yeah, he deeply engaged with the international black diaspora, attended that 1945 Fifth Pan-African Congress, absorbing that militant atmosphere demanding immediate independence that shaped so many others.
And post-independence.
Post-independence, Kenyatta maintained Kenya's place in the newly formed Organization of African Unity, the OAU, the continent's main Pan-African body. Offered rhetorical support for liberation movements. However, his foreign policy primarily prioritized Western relations, national stability, and economic growth within Kenya, demonstrating a more cautious, less interventionist approach to continental affairs compared to Nkrumah or Nyerere.
A different focus.
A different focus. He chose to build Kenya internally, rather than spearheading broader continental initiatives.
So, as we reflect on the enduring legacy and the Pan-African aspirations of these four giants, it's clear their collective impact was monumental. The chilling prescience of Nkrumah's warnings about neocolonialism, they still resonate today, don't they, as African nations grapple with debt, resource extraction, external influence.
Absolutely. And the lessons from Lumumba's fierce fight for economic sovereignty, for dignity, they're timeless. His tragic fate continues to highlight the incredibly high stakes involved in asserting control over one's own resources.
And Nyerere.
Nyerere's unwavering commitment to self-reliance, to human-centered development, that Utu, it remains a powerful beacon for ethical governance, for equitable growth models, even if Ujamaa itself faced practical challenges.
And Kenyatta's complex legacy. It highlights those enduring challenges of balancing national unity, stability, and equitable development in the post-colonial era, showcasing the difficult trade-offs leaders often faced and still face.
Definitely. These leaders, with their differing approaches, their often contradictory legacies, they truly laid the foundations for independent Africa.
Yeah.
And their debates on the path forward, from governance models to economic systems, the very definition of unity, they continue to shape the continent to this very day.
So we've journeyed through the profound, often turbulent paths of Jomo Kenyatta, Patrice Lumumba, Kwame Nkrumah, and Julius Nyerere. We've seen their unique visions for independence, for national unity, for continental liberation, and the complex realities of implementing these grand ideals in the face of immense challenges.
It's been quite a journey through their lives and times.
And their stories are far from mere historical footnotes, are they? They are dynamic living lessons. They highlight the enduring struggle for sovereignty, for economic justice, for genuine unity in a complex global landscape.
The trade-offs between stability and freedom, the constant fight against external influence, the imperative of self-determination. These remain as relevant today for Africa and beyond as they were during their time.
So as you reflect on these titans of African independence, maybe consider this. How do the individual nation-building choices made by these founders continue to shape the path towards a truly united and prosperous Africa today?
And perhaps more importantly, thinking about that unfinished symphony, what role can you play, can any of us play, in carrying forward their project of liberation and self-determination in our own ways?